Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about overwhelm. And if you have a question or a thought that you'd like to share with us, drop that below. So let's figure out more about this overwhelm. Because when overwhelm is part of your life, when you're feeling it, it can pull you away from feeling that rational thought, which delivers a rational behavior. So overwhelm can actually put you into a stress mode where you're not behaving at your best. And if you felt it, sometimes it feels like a domino. One thing can trigger you, and then the whole stack of things that you had planned that day gets stopped. Because overwhelm can sometimes freeze us in place. So, what is overwhelm? How do we deal with it? That's the question we're going to talk about now. So let's move to talking about overwhelm being something and happening when we have too many things coming at us. Maybe there's too much work, things are coming too quickly. Usually, overwhelm has to do with too much, too many, too often, too fast. Now, it can affect us psychologically. If we have a mindset that isn't necessarily the growth mindset, if we have a fixed mindset, or if we have limiting beliefs about ourselves, overwhelm can snag us that way. If at work we have a toxic situation or a boss who's not assisting us to get our work done, we could feel overwhelmed just with the day to day. Overwhelm can happen when we have physical stress. Maybe we've had an illness. Maybe we're feeling weak. Maybe we have an injury. And these unique times with a pandemic and geopolitical unrest, definitely there can be too many things that don't seem like they're working. And that can lend us to feel overwhelmed. And sometimes, again, overwhelm can make us procrastinate or can encourage us to stop instead of act. So we're going to turn to Dr. Andrew Huberman. Andrew Huberman runs the Huberman podcast. He's a professor at Stanford, and he's a professor in neurobiology and ophthalmology. So he's a pretty smart guy. And one of the things he reminds us to do when we encounter overwhelm is he reminds us to recognize that it comes from our past, from our evolution, and not make it the villain. If our ancestors had seen a tiger or a bear and they were being chased by it, the overwhelm would help them get away. So it's not something that we want to stuff. Overwhelm is something we want to get through. And another way to think about overwhelm is perhaps it's something that's trying to keep you safe. So what are some ways that we can deal with it? Well, immediately I'm going to drop down and tell you that we can go down below, and I have dropped an article with 3 ideas of what you can do with it. I am also going to read you a couple of questions that people have sent in, knowing we're going to do this presentation, and we can answer some of your questions perhaps by answering their questions. So the first one says, Lynn, most of my overwhelm is connected to work. I'm in a managerial position. There's a lot of stuff that needs my attention. And I've heard the strategy, prioritize the most important things first, then get to the rest. But lately, I'm trying that, and I'm finding that my emails are later. They're on the later list, and I'm getting to those late, and my colleagues are upset with me. What's a good strategy for dealing with this? Well, I want to just share quickly with email, making a mental shift away from having email just being an additional thing we do and looking at it as one of those modes of communication that we must do in order to keep relationships healthy and to keep lines of communication moving work forward. So something you might consider, if you haven't done this already, is to identify at least 2 times, sometimes 3, morning, midday, afternoon, where you do have time scheduled to go into email and peruse the most important things and deal with the tasks related to the email. Not only do I do this on a daily basis, but I also do this on a weekly basis. So once a week, I have a time toward the end of the week, usually Thursday, where I go through every email that has not been answered yet, and I clear the emails out so I'm prepared for the next week. Just something to think about so you can overcome overwhelm and work with it and get through it when it comes to email. The next question comes from another person who said, speak more about the pandemic, Lynn. I know it's hard for me, especially when I'm being pressured to get back to normal, go back to work. And then I have small children who are being sent home from preschool because of COVID outbreaks. It's a lot. And we're going into our third year of a pandemic where it's really weighing on me. What do I do? Well, again, I might use some of Huberman's attitude of dealing with it. Not to just say buck up or calm down. That won't do you any good, or stuffing the overwhelm. But instead, put it in perspective. Think about people who lived through the Spanish flu, people who lived through the Great Depression, people who lived through the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. What happens if we step back and realize we're at an inflection point that's just as critical in our history right now as those monumental things? And what we probably want to do is pay attention to self-care. How much sleep? How many proper meals are we having? How much rest? How much recovery? Laughing, loving, having joy. Not only eating right, but getting enough water. This is a good time to go back to self-care and take care of yourself, and to remember what Gandhi said, be the change. So if there's something in your life that you need to change, it may be around self-care so that the overwhelm from the outside doesn't penetrate your peace of mind as much. Are there things to be concerned about? Yes. The first step would be, this is a great indicator for me and for you when we have this overwhelm coming in from the things that we can't control outside ourselves, to get back into control of what we can take charge of and take charge of it. Okay, I hope this has been useful. Today we've covered overwhelm. We've given you some ideas of where it might be happening in your life, a couple of ideas of things you can do if you're interested in mitigating against it and going through it instead of stuffing it. Other questions, other thoughts you have, please drop them below. And if this was useful, you may want to share it with a friend. So please send it on and let them know that we're here to support you through the good times and the overwhelming times. Thanks for joining us.